we haven't talked about really two big trades that I want to talk about. First one being DeAaron Fox, guys.
Love that trade
Dude,
for
so
Seamus.
Fox, so this is like my thing, right? It felt like Trae Young, Victor Wembanyama like not reunion,
Oh,
sorry, but a pairing was like it was meant
yeah.
to be, right? Here you have Trae Young, this is just like this guard that kind of lacks defensive ability, that needs a back of a big man to kind of to lean back on, and here's Wemby, who kind of needs a playmaking shooting guard to kind of run the offense, to be to continue that lob threat and to allow him the space. And then they go Fox, who I'm like thinking about. It's like, okay, well, here comes De'Aaron Fox, who's this kind of two-way playmaker who can score and light you up for
Fast.
50, right? So it's like, what do you guys think of this move? Because between Fox and Young, I'm always going to lean Fox because of what he can do defensively that Trae Young can't. You pair him with Wemby, and all of a sudden you have a duo that now in San Antonio, talk about the rich getting richer,
Well,
right? I mean, this is a duo that can propel you into deep playoff runs for the next 6 years.
it was I think it was a multi-team trade, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, Levine, King.
Yep.
It always shocks me a little bit when not sort of so rivals, but when two conference teams who are in the race against each other make significant deals like this. And I was a little bit surprised that, although I love the pairing, one of my favorite trades of the deadline, underrated trade at the deadline. A little bit surprised Sacramento agreed to let De'Aaron Fox go out to San Antonio and pair up with Victor Wembanyama to be one of the more young, springy, for the future duos in this league, and a little bit of a head scratcher for me that Sacramento would allow this to a team where they're competing with in the standings. San Antonio has fallen a little bit behind in these last couple of weeks, but this is certainly a move that could reignite the flame that San Antonio had earlier in the season. So a little bit surprised that Sacramento made this deal with San Antonio.
Well, this trade deal, I believe, sets up the San Antonio Spurs for the future. And what I find funny is about some of these deals. Ultimately, you see star players going from place to place, but they're actually going down in the standings. Jimmy Butler, he went from a 7 seed to a 10 seed, and then De'Aaron Fox, he goes from an 8 seed to now, I believe the Spurs are either 11th or 12th in the Western Conference right now. So we're seeing actually stars go down in the standings, but these are more moves for the future. Now the Warriors, they actually want to turn it on this year more so than say the Spurs. But the Spurs, this is certainly a move for the future. And De'Aaron Fox and Wemby together, that this is a move that you look at the Spurs and go, they are ready to compete with Victor Wembanyama. They're not ready to, they're not preparing to lose more and more and more and more. We've seen teams of the past really make that mistake with star players when they finally gain those star players on the roster, finally harbor those star players, or I should say rookie star players, when they have those generational rookies, right? They'll just kind of fool around with them. You didn't think about Anthony Davis in New Orleans. It was like, oh, they keep losing, they keep losing, they keep losing. And there are a lot of other star players out there like that where they get into a situation across the league. They're great right away, and then the team just kind of wants to keep losing in order to pair other young star players around them through the draft. Well, Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs, they're not going through that at this moment in time, because De'Aaron Fox, I would really say in this trade deal that the Sacramento Kings, I kind of like their return for De'Aaron Fox, considering the fact they actually acquired Zach LaVine. Now, I will say I don't know where Sacramento wants to go, because they're just building onto their eight seeded squad. They go from De'Aaron Fox to Zach LaVine. I think Zach LaVine, you see out east, the Bulls are a perpetual 9 or 10 seed, and now you have Valanciunas too, traded to the Sacramento Kings from the Washington Wizards, and that deal. And you really look at, DeRozan, LaVine, Valanciunas, almost sounds like DeRozan, LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic on the Chicago Bulls, who are a perpetual 8, 9, 10 seed. And that's what the Kings are that's where they're kind of going right now. And I understand why Fox would want a different situation in the NBA at this point in time, especially after the Kings fired Mike Brown. I have no idea what Fox really thought of that or not. But I would say the Kings' return was okay. But at the same time, the Chicago Bulls, they gave the Sacramento Kings Zach LaVine. And I think in that 3-team deal, I think the Spurs made out phenomenally because they didn't give up. Now, they gave up some draft capital for sure. They gave up that 2031 Minnesota pick, which could be substantial in the future. You never know. But they gave up some nice draft capital in that trade, the San Antonio Spurs did. But in terms of players, I mean, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, I mean, I really don't. I don't see any, like, you don't see any of the young players coming out of San Antonio going, oh, whoa, they had to give up. I mean, they weren't going to give up Stephon Castle, I don't think, for De'Aaron Fox, but somebody like Devin Vassell, certainly a name that could have came up in that deal. And you just didn't see any of those names come off the board. So San Antonio really made out in terms of not giving up any of their young talent right now and still acquiring talent that's going to help all their players still on the roster. And they did give up some draft capital, I do think. But the Kings, I think they had a nice return in this deal, getting Zach LaVine back for De'Aaron Fox at the end of the day and a couple of picks. But the Bulls, I look at the Bulls in this deal and I go, okay,
what are you doing?
What was going on here? Because I don't see anything the Bulls really got in this deal that I'm super fascinated with whatsoever. I mean, you look at I'm looking here. Do we have the ticker up here on the Zach LaVine trade? I don't know, but regardless, I'm looking at what the Bulls got in return.
Barely any
Zach Collins and Zach LaVine. But going back on the Zach LaVine point, really quick, Zach LaVine is a good player. He could actually add to a championship level squad somewhere. I don't think he's going to be your number one, but could he be your number two or number three? I think certainly so. And his contract is big, but we're seeing the number go up and up and up for all these contracts. And I believe Zach LaVine, he could be a player somewhere down in the future. Maybe the Kings. The thing with the Kings is you think, oh, they're going to potentially sell Zach LaVine in the future, but I don't. The Kings have actually wanted Zach LaVine ever since he was a restricted free agent a long time ago, almost 10 years ago now. So I think they're actually going to hold on to Zach LaVine in this situation. But I don't know where the Kings are going. I do like the return of Zach LaVine as an asset. I do believe he can be a player that's a second or third best player on a championship level team. He's a great scorer. He's of course a great shooter. He's one of the best shooters in the league. Doesn't get enough credit for it whatsoever. I think it's because of the Bulls' record and where they're always at in the standings. But yeah, I just don't agree with the Chicago Bulls giving up Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings for what their return was. I would rather just keep Zach LaVine. I don't know what the Bulls are trying to do because they didn't move on from Nikola Vucevic. They have Kobe White still on the roster. I have no idea what the Bulls are trying to do at this point in time. I think they got worse by giving up Zach LaVine. But if you're going to tear the house down, tear the whole house down. You don't just tear half the house down and leave the living room. You don't tear half the house down and leave the kitchen. That's what the Chicago Bulls are doing right now. They go, okay, Vooch, you stay here, but everybody else, they're gone. So the Chicago Bulls, they're one of those perplexing teams. I think the Kings are too in this deal, but the Spurs, they're the clear winners. They didn't give up anything quite substantial other than draft capital that they could look at later on down the line and go, oh, that would have been nice to have. But hey, we got De'Aaron Fox out of this deal. And I think the Spurs are making the right moves, going out and really putting pieces next to Victor Wembanyama in a time period where they need to be doing so. Because Victor Wembanyama, he's on the rise right now. He is on the rise. He's already one of the best defensive players in the NBA. He's already, if you look at all the advanced stats, he's almost an MVP caliber player already. And that's scary considering he's still half a decade away from his prime. Victor Wembanyama, he was one of the more hyped draft picks in a long time. Well, I should say since Zion Williamson, and before that, maybe Anthony Davis, and then before that, LeBron James. But Victor Wembanyama, he's living up to all of that hype. And right now, the Spurs, they can't dilly-dally with all this losing. They can't be down in the standings in the Western Conference with Victor Wembanyama because we always know the clock is ticking on some of these young players. I know the Supermax exists nowadays, but the clock is always ticking when it comes to, is this player, does he want out? Does he want another situation? Oh, he's tired of losing here. Is he going to force his way out? So the Spurs, they made a tremendous deal at this deadline, acquiring De'Aaron Fox from the Kings, who, again, just not really sure what their direction was. Still like their return for the Fox deal, but I'm not really sure what they're trying to do with the roster.
The second De'Aaron Fox that got put up on the market, that's the ticket. 27 years old, De'Aaron Fox. That's the big trade deadline ticket. That's your golden ticket right there. If you're a team, I mean, outside of Luka Doncic, who I don't count because of how lucky and how obscure and how ridiculous that is. But I mean, if you're a team in the NBA and you, in 27-year-old, just entered his prime, De'Aaron Fox puts up on the market, right? That is the guy you go after. That's the guy that, if you're a team like, Miami, like, you want to win now, but you want to be set for the future. De'Aaron Fox is your guy, man. I mean, I love this trade from San Antonio. You're going to get better post deadline with low expectations, right? Whatever happens this year is A-okay. You're going to have an opportunity in the offseason to continue to build around Victor Wembanyama, right? Because this is a trade that fits next to their superstar, right? How many times do we see Devin Booker is a perfect example of this in Phoenix. The one time they built around their superstar, they were really good, right? The prior 6 years they stunk, they didn't do it. Then the post 3 years of that, they stopped building around Booker and they started adding random talent. It didn't work. What does San Antonio do? Okay, what's the type of player we need to pair next to Victor Wembanyama to be successful? Probably a versatile playmaker who can also get us a bucket. Height doesn't really play a big factor here because of the defensive versatility Wembanyama presents and how unique he is. De'Aaron Fox, 27? Yeah, no, that will do. I mean, A+ move from San Antonio. Seamus, I can't agree more. This is a trade that sets San Antonio up in the long run while maintaining win now mentality. Look at it from a Kings standpoint. Yeah, same thing. You're kind of just committed to being in the play-in, to being a playoff team. Levine's going to give that to you. I look at Chicago from the Chicago side of this, and I'm like, okay, like you're the big loser here. You traded Levine, who has actually played very, very well this season. That not a lot of people are talking about, but Levine has played very well. You don't get a first-round pick. Maybe it's addition by subtraction. You're gonna tank in the draft order. You give guys like Matas Buzeli, who's actually played very well this season in the limited minutes, some more run. Maybe this is your first step into what tanking looks like, which they've needed to do now for about 2 seasons, and they haven't done. So again, maybe it's a win without actually it being a win for Chicago. But oh my God, San Antonio, outside of LA, you win the deadline because this move was pure. This shows me, I mean, what else do you expect from the San Antonio Spurs, the prestigious front office? They know what they're doing. They've done this for 20 years. Because, I mean, really, really, this is a pure masterclass of GMing from San Antonio. You get the 27-year-old on the market. He is no doubt, I mean, he is up for money in this upcoming offseason. Talk about players who lose money, guys. Right? Luka lost that Supermax. Sorry, Fox. You also are going to lose out on some money with an extension with San Antonio. But I mean, oh my God, these guys, the Spurs, they're going to be really good in about 2 years. And guess what? In 2 years, De'Aaron Fox is still going to be sub 30. So A+ from the Spurs, Franco. A+. I love it. Thank you. This is how GMing should be done. Take notes, Phoenix. Take notes. I mean, this is how you do it.
And any team, really.
This is how you do it.
This trade deadline, it kind of seemed like a lot of moves were just moved to fixed salaries, and I didn't really feel like a lot of teams took the opportunity to really improve their team either with the long term or short term. But the San Antonio Spurs really have cemented themselves as the up next and upcoming team in the Western Conference. As you look around the Western Conference, you see teams like the Phoenix Suns who are adding just a random talent and kind of just piecing things together as time goes. But you're going to see these teams really fall off a cliff as of next season. And the lane for the Spurs up to the top of the Western Conference after this season or the next, and a couple of contracts expire on other teams, is right to the top. They're going to probably be able to contend for top 3 seeding in the Western Conference very shortly, especially after this move and how well their players around them are developing. You look at teams like the Warriors, which we'll dive into after this, making a move for Jimmy Butler. Great for now. Great. It feeds the media narrative gets that quote unquote star next to Curry and Draymond, but it's not really a move that I see being a difference maker in Steph Curry going for another contending run in the West. And I think that we're going to see the West be a really big shootout from the fourth seed up to the 11th seed because they're so tight knit and very close to 500. So there's going to be a lot of teams in the West that don't make the playoffs or the play-in tournament by maybe a half of a game, and it's going to be really interesting to see what transpires. But I think the East kind of really made a lot of statements with the hierarchy of power and the standings, and it's a lot more stand put. And a lot of teams on the Eastern Conference really made their statements of that we are going to be a top contending team, and then a lot of teams really took their foot off their gas this off for this trade deadline.